had been mapping the newly discovered cave systems in northern Wyoming when I stumbled upon it. An uncharted, hidden cavity beneath the limestone grandeur. This wasn't your typical spelunking thrill. I wasn't decorated with adrenaline junkies, bravado. Just a plateau GPS unit, 4 days' worth of Evercool rations, and a deep-seated need to chart the uncharted. The air grew cooler as I descended deeper, tapping my headlamp into a steady rhythm with each careful step. The limestone walls bled into shadows, molding shapes in the dim light that played tricks on my eyes. I was no stranger to the belly of the earth, but something in the pulse of this place set my heart adrift. Should have marked it a sign, maybe. Should have turned back. But the allure, ever the fool's excuse, pushed me forward. Laid bare by the beam of my lamp, a nearly imperceptible draft teased my neck. The pathway had split unknowingly, and I, focused on mapping, hadn't noticed the fork until then. Choosing the left, the draft pulled slightly stronger, drawing me deeper with the promise of vast chambers untouched by human foot or folly. Within an hour, the path contracted to a crawl space, the wind mournfully whistling through the tight corridor. Then the space opened, abruptly, into a cathedral-like cavern that shouldn't have been there. An architectural anomaly that bore no natural kinship with the winding passages from which it was born. The ground was oddly smooth, deliberately flat, almost crafted. A cluster of stones stood oddly geometric in arrangement at the cavern's center. Not natural, altered, moved by something. Someone, archaeological meddling or other spelunkers could explain it, yet the fresh silence bespoke of neither. I scanned the chamber, noting several small alcoves dotting the walls. They seemed ordinary enough until my light lingered over the farthest one on the left, where the shadows convulsed subtly, like the soft glistening of water. Or was it movement? Focusing my gaze and steadying my breath, I watched. When several tense seconds passed without recurrence, I chalked it up to my strained senses. However, that comfort was short-lived as a soft, distinct clacking echoed through the cavern. Not a drip of water or the settling of rock, something deliberate. A communication of sorts. My mouth was dry, thoughts flitting to the exit, but my limbs betrayed my fear, edging me toward the sound. The clacking had increased in pace and seemed focused near the peculiar stone arrangement. As I approached, a chill swept through the cavern, tangible and possessing an intent that felt almost curious. Reaching out a tentative hand, barely brushing the nearest stone with my fingers, the entire atmosphere shifted. It was as though by acknowledging the arrangement, I had accepted some unspoken invitation. Backing away, every instinct screamed to exit, regroup, document from safety. Yet, underlying that was a maddening draw. How many could find such a discovery and simply walk away? Just then, the ground beneath the stones shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, akin to a great beast stirring in its sleep. I froze, my light fixed on the stones. They hadn't moved, though everything in me said they had. I felt, rather than saw, something alter in the chamber's air, a charge that whispered of ancient pulsations stirring awake beneath. That's when I finally recorded, something is here, something shouldn't be. Even as I spoke, a deeper shadow cast itself across the far end of the cavern, stretching like the slow yawn of nightfall. Something was indeed awakening. Or had it been awaiting? Either way, my presence had altered something fundamental. Choosing discretion against valor, I began a slow retreat, my movements measured and cautious. Each step back toward the passage felt laden, as if I were pulling away from an immense gravity, the draft now a gale urging me to stay as my headlamp flickered unsettlingly. Just on the cusp of the lighter, narrower corridor, a sudden shift. The cavern seemed to breathe in, a low, resonant inhalation that felt both a warning and lament, filling the vast hollow with a resonant certainty of unseen depths stirring beneath the quiet earth. The inhale of the cavern resonated through my bones, a primal summons that I couldn't ignore. With a deep-seated trepidation, my feet carried me forward, drawn by a force that felt as ancient as the stone beneath my boots. The hieratic dawn of exploration beckoned me deeper into the abyss where nature's rules twisted under an unrevealed law. As the passage widened again, the air grew tense, charged with a palpable unease that gripped at my senses. Each step I took felt as though it were across a thin, stretched membrane separating what I knew from what was forbidden to know. The soft clacking sound that had beckoned me was now replaced by a sheer silence that hummed with anticipation. It felt as if the cavern itself was listening, waiting for my next move. The edge of my light revealed more of the cavern, the walls glistening as if wet. But the moisture was too uniform, the walls too reflective, resembling polished glass rather than rough stone. My headlamp caught something, a series of markings, not carvings, but rather embossings that seemed to rise organically from the walls. They spiraled in patterns that made my head swim if I looked too long, suggesting a complex language or map beyond my deciphering. Tentatively, I reached out to touch the nearest wall. The surface was cool and smooth, vibrating faintly under my fingertips as if it pulsed with a slow, steady heartbeat. Pulling my hand back, the sensations lingered, a subtle numbness taking root. The passage suddenly forked again into two distinct pathways. Left or right, an arbitrary choice made monumental by the oppressive silence. The pull was different now, less inviting and more demanding. My decision felt somehow significant, as though it would decide more than my mere physical direction. Swallowing the growing lump in my throat, I chose the right, driven by an unspoken promise of answers. As I ventured deeper, the passage narrowed, forcing me to squeeze through gaps that felt like they were closing in on me. My backpack scraped against the sides, the sound unnaturally loud in the taut silence. The air was cooler here. Each breath I drew felt laden with a story I was yet to understand. Then, ahead, a dim glow filtered through the tight space, a phosphorescent shimmer that bathed the upcoming chamber in a ghostly blue. As I emerged into the wider area, momentarily blithe. Ended by the transition, my heart caught in my throat. The chamber was a dome, massive and echoing, the walls lined with thousands of those same luminescent markings, now aglow. In the center stood an altar-like table. Atop it, an object swathed in shadows, undefined but undeniably central, as if anchoring the entire cavern. Approaching the object, each step felt heavier, more consequential. As the distance closed, the details of the object began to discern themselves, an intricate model composed of what looked like bones, stones, and dried botanicals woven together with an artisan's precision. It wasn't static. It shifted subtly, almost breathing with a rhythm that echoed the earlier pulse of the walls. Reaching out, hesitating mere inches from the model, every instinct screamed to retreat. But driven by a desire to understand, to bring back something tangible from this surreal encounter, my fingers brushed the construction. Instantly, the cavern trembled, a deep groan of stone grinding against stone reverberating through the air. I jerked my hand away, backing rapidly towards the way I had come. But the passage through which I entered no longer existed, replaced by a smooth, unyielding wall. Panic clawed at my chest as I turned, frantically surveying the chamber for another exit. It was then a new sound caught my attention, a delicate, pattering echo like rainfall. From the walls, droplets began to seep, pooling on the floor and creeping forward in my direction as if with intent. Merging together, they formed a shallow, creeping tide moving towards my feet. Trapped with the only conceivable exit sealed and the encroaching water promising an unknown fate, a dreadful understanding descended upon me. This cave had never been a mere geographical anomaly. It was something far older, demanding more than just physical exploration. And I had stepped into its sanctum, unbidden and now seemingly unwelcome. Water rose around my ankles, cold and seemingly sentient, as if each ripple were a whisper from the deep, urging me deeper into despair. I cast a desperate glance at the dome above, its vastness mocking my plight. The object on the altar seemed to pulsate more intensely now, as though it were heartened by my panic. From the water arose a soft, insidious fog, cloaking the lower half of the chamber in obscurity and muting the already dim glow of the phosphorescent markings. My mind raced for a solution, a way to reverse what had been set in motion by my touch. I approached the altar once more, my movements sluggish as if the water and the mist were collaborators, impeding my progress. The structure of bones and stones appeared less like an inanimate model under this ghostly illumination, and more like a sacrificial offering to some forgotten deity. As I stood there, contemplating the cryptic assembly, the air shifted. The once stagnant atmosphere churned as though waking from a long slumber. The chamber seemed to contract, the walls inching closer, pressing in with a slow, deliberate threat of entombment. The panic that had settled into my bones now turned to resolve. My only conceivable hope lay in interaction with the altar's bizarre tableau. I reached out once more, fingers trembling, and this time, instead of a mere touch, I attempted to rearrange a segment of the dried botanicals to disrupt whatever ancient mechanism I had unwittingly set off. A sharp, discordant note rang out from the object, the sound slicing through the cavern like a warning bell. The water around my feet recoiled as if pained, and then, with a malevolent hiss, surged upward, swallowing my legs and anchoring me to the spot. It was not merely water, but a form of relentless, living mire, dragging me down towards the cavern floor. Desperation took hold, and I engaged in a frantic struggle, pulling against the unyielding grip of the liquid. It was then I saw, through the murk and the dim light, shapes moving within the walls themselves. Not water, but something far denser, a pulsating tissue that had begun to seep through the glossy surfaces, reshaping the cave's anatomy. Voices, or what my mind interpreted as voices, reverberated through the viscous air, speaking in tongues indecipherable yet laden with intent. They seemed to echo out from the walls, the model, the very water that sought to claim me. "All are returned," they murmured, a chant that seemed as old as time itself. The water, now reaching my waist, slowed its ascent, its purpose momentarily fulfilled. I was not to drown, I realized, but to be absorbed, integrated into the cavern's ancient narrative. The walls pulsed more vigorously now, each throb in sync with my accelerating heartbeat. In that moment of horrifying clarity, I did the only thing left to do. I turned to the model on the altar. If touching it had triggered this nightmare, perhaps there was a way to use it to communicate or plea for release. I seized the structure, no longer gentle, but with all the force my precarious position allowed. Auder et obtemporare. I listen and comply. I tried mimicking the formality of the voices, hoping entreaty might spare me. To my astonishment, the rush of water halted completely. The mist began to dissolve, and for a moment I thought I saw a form, a figure shrouded in the evaporating haze, towering and ominous, observing my struggle with an air of detached curiosity. "You intrude, yet you adapt," it spoke, or perhaps the words simply formed within my head. "What are you seeking in the depths of that which you do not comprehend?" "I seek understanding," I replied, gasping as the water began to recede. "To observe and learn, not to disturb." The figure, its contours blurring and reforming like a sculpture of sand and mist, paused. Then slowly, the chamber began to revert, the walls ceasing their ominous advance, and the passage I had entered through reappeared, now clear and inviting escape. With a last look at the altar, now inert and somber in the receding light, I understood the cave's final lesson. Here lay knowledge, boundless and profound, guarded not by locks, but by willingness to endure its trials. Nursing my chilled limbs, I retreated through the passage, every step weighed with the gravity of my uninvited intrusion and narrow escape. As I emerged under the stars, The cool night air felt like salvation. The cave's breath followed, a lingering whisper in the wind, reminding me that some sanctums are not to visit unbidden or unchanged. I staggered away from the cave's mouth, the night sky a twisted canopy of inky black peppered with cold, indifferent stars. With every step, the cave's whisper faded into the wind's moan, yet the grip it had on my mind remained unyielded, tight, claustrophobic. The night no longer seemed benign, but bore a heavy vigilance, as if it too were a part of that ancient place, watching, remembering my escape. The path before me wound through gnarled trees whose branches twisted in torment or warning. Their leaves rustled with a sound much like laughter or lamentation, though I knew neither was possible. It was absurd to lend such human characteristics to the wind. Yet hadn't the cave itself been alive in some unfathomable way? I found my thoughts cycling through terror and wonder, disbelief and an aching, gnawing need to understand. As the suffocating embrace of the trees thickened, I reconsidered the cave's final message carried on that ghostly breeze. Not unchanged. The phrase bore down on me, a spectral weight that tugged at the edges of my sanity. What did it signify? Had I been altered by the cave's mysteries, touched permanently by its ancient, sentient hands? Halfway through the woods, a shimmer caught my eye, a mirage formed of moonlight on mist, or so my exhausted mind insisted. Closer inspection revealed it was not mist, but a filmy web stretching between two stout trees, delicate yet disturbingly unplaceable. The web vibrated slightly, as if strummed by unseen fingers. It held within its strands not the dew of night, but tiny specks of luminescence, like the glow from the cave's eerie altarpiece. I recoiled at the sight, heart pounding with renewed dread. Was this another of the cave's lingering effects, a part of its ecology extended into my world? The web seemed an aberration in nature, too structured, too sentient. I was minded to turn back, to return to my car, and forget this night ever happened. But something irresistible about the web called to me. Approaching it again, my hand trembling, I extended a finger towards the luminescence. Just as my skin made contact, the light surged along the web and up my arm. The sensation was not painful, but alarmingly intimate, like a secret shared in confidence. The light pulsed at my pulse points, then settled into the contours of my veins, a faint glow beneath my skin. Horrified yet fascinated, I watched as the illumination dimmed to a barely perceptible thread, as if it had decided to reside within me, a permanent, unwanted guest. The web itself seemed to sag, its purpose fulfilled. What had I done? What had I become? A deep, primal fear urged me to scrub at my skin, to cleanse myself of the cave's contamination, but a stronger, more terrifying part compelled me to preserve this frightening communion. I stood divided under the skeletal trees, a man touched by the incomprehensible. I resumed my walk, the sensation of being followed creeping along my spine. Or perhaps it was just the newfound awareness of the cave's gift, its curse, manifesting as paranoia. The wind grew colder, more insistent, as if trying to erode my resolve, pushing me towards some unseen edge. The trail ended at my car, parked lonely under a streetlight that flickered sporadically. On, then off, as though struggling against an unseen strain. Fumbling keys, heart skirmishing against my rib cage, I unlocked the door and slid inside, the familiar space offering scant comfort. I sat, breathing heavily, staring into the rear-view mirror. My eyes, expectedly fearful, showed a faint reflectiveness that wasn't there before. The glow from within me, now internal, casting its eerie luminance. I started the engine, the sound a sudden roar in the night's enveloping silence. As the car's headlights pierced the darkness, I spied, not far down the road, a semblance of that filmy web stretched across the path, larger, more intricate, waiting. The cave had whispered of places unbidden, of changes unasked for. As I drove towards the shimmering blockade, the tendrils of the cave's spell pulling at the edges of my mind, I understood at last the height of its sway. The journey home would not be a simple escape, but another passage altogether. I pressed the gas pedal, the car's momentum carrying me forward into the unknown weave of my altered fate. The night air no longer salvation, but a boundary crossed, a deeper darkness welcomed.